Brilliant. Great.
Great. Okay. So a very warm welcome to everybody that has joined this second webinar on digital assessment that we're hosting within RM Assessment. It's a pleasure to have you all that have joined today. I suspect there'll be more people joining over the next sort of 15-20 minutes if it runs to form as it did last time earlier in this summer. So a very warm welcome to you. Over the next sort of half an hour or so, we're going to be exploring the topic of protecting the integrity of assessment in a changing world. And I think the protecting the integrity of assessment is becoming increasingly important. I think it's a subject that I've certainly heard spoken about a lot in many of the conferences that I've attended and that my colleagues within RM have attended, and it's becoming increasingly a challenge in terms of how do you detect, how do you put the right processes in place, how do you try and reduce the probability of malpractice occurring in high stakes assessment across the whole value chain in every step. And I think it's a challenge that exam boards face regardless of where we are in the world. And I think as well, there's a real sense of students becoming more savvy and more aware of what they can do and how they can share their own tools and techniques of actually how to cheat. So I think ourselves as a technology provider in assessment and as exam boards across the world, thinking through how we can continually think about and provide tools and services and improved processes to prevent and reduce the amount of malpractice that is going on is absolutely key, because any malpractice will devalue the validity and the value of an assessment once it has been released. So it's a really, really important topic for us. We're going to share with you over the next sort of half an hour or so some thoughts, some ideas that we've been working on, and very much want to engage in discussion of how we can move this forward with exam boards like yourselves that are joining this call. Just move on to the next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. So what we'll do, and the agenda is we'll set some context, and then we're going to look about three key areas to explore briefly. One about how to prevent and detect external assistance, how to prevent and detect impersonation, and then how to prevent and detect collusion, and then we'll move into a Q&A session. So that's the broad agenda that we're going to look at. We're very much looking forward to having questions through the chat as we go on, and it might be that we address some of those questions as we're presenting, or we pick them up at the end. But please feel free to enter your questions or observations as we go through in the chat functionality, and we can pick them up. What I'd like to do is just introduce some of the people that are going to be contributing this morning. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. So I'm Steve Harrington. I'm head of sector, incorporating sort of Africa as one of our key areas to work in. So I'm delighted to warmly introduce you today. I'd also like to introduce Sam. So Sam's the only person I'm actually going to introduce. I'm going to ask my other colleagues to introduce themselves, but if Sam, you could wave. I am introducing Sam because Sam has sort of lost her voice. She was doing quite a bit of training over the weekend for actually one of our customers in Africa, and that was quite a long session, so she's lost her voice. So I'm going to introduce Sam. Some of you will know Sam, I'm sure, actually. But Sam Jones is one of our leading solutions consultants, so works very closely with us as the team to think through the right propositions for customers when it comes to digital assessment and e-marking. So just give us a little wave, Sam, say hello, but no, don't say hello, but just so great to have you on board. So what I'll do now is just introduce other people that are on the screen. So first of all, I'm going to go to Ian.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Ian Castledine, and I look after our propositions within the assessment business at RM. Really nice to meet you. And Gwyneth?
Oh, hi, I'm Gwyneth Toolan. I work in the innovation space as a product manager, looking at digital assessment specifically. I'll give you a bit more info on that in a minute. I'll pass on to Lex.
Thanks. Hi there. My name is Alex Spencer. I'm a data scientist at RM. My experience here includes things like computer vision, so auto zoning, RM indexing, and I also help to create our pilot exam malpractice service. And I will pass to Ian. No, sorry, I'll pass to
Okay, we're all done,
Steve.
probably.
We're all done. All done.
Back to
We are
Steve.
all done.
Thank you. So again, if there's any terminology that we're using throughout this session, then again, please raise a hand or put a note in the chat. And we can explain if there's any particular terminology. If it gets a little bit too technical, then we can explain those various phrases that we're using. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ian to kick us off with the presentation. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Steve. So I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes just to set the context for our session today. And we work in the business of high stakes assessment. It's a large part of our operations within RM. And because of that, we know that every result matters. And it's important that candidates get the results that they've worked so hard for and that they've earned. And that all exams are marked and administered correctly and that students get the right grades. But it's equally important that we establish and maintain qualifications with integrity and that we do look for and address issues of cheating and malpractice wherever they arise. And because we work in the high stakes assessment arena, we work with organisations where those qualifications that they're awarding to candidates are particularly important. They can lead to lead to the ability to enter professions where if an individual hasn't got the skill that they profess to have, that the qualification says they have, that could be really quite dangerous. We don't want individuals being able to enter professions or roles that they're not able to perform to the right standard. And issues with people trying to circumvent the process and trying to cheat the systems happens all over the world. And a lot of time and energy is spent trying to maintain the integrity of assessments. This isn't a problem that's unique to any one region in the world. In some jurisdictions, exam centres have got sufficient rigour to ensure that locally controlled checks are sufficient to identify individual cheats, with protections against things like handwritten notes being passed around, smuggled phones being used in the exam. In other places, local controls aren't sufficient to prevent issues arising. In some regions, local logistics routes are secure and can be relied upon. In other places, there can be risks throughout the exam administration process. The focus on our webinar today is to look at three particular areas that we understand present particular challenges in various African nations. And this is going to include looking at three things that are at very different levels of product maturity. We're going to start off with some ideas that are at the very earliest stages of discovery. Just exploring some ideas that and hypotheses which we believe could really help and make a difference to some of the challenges that are being faced today. We're then going to share some ideas where we already have work in progress that could help to address current challenges. And then we'll look at what the future might bring with some emerging technologies that we already have in research and development stages, where we're working with existing clients on newer technologies in the world of digital assessment. But to start off with, I'm going to hand over to Gwyneth, and she's just going to share a little of that earliest discovery stage with us. So Gwyneth, over to you.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, I just wanted to add that obviously before working in this space where Alex Spencer and I work very much in the innovation arm of RM, I did work for an exam board. So I worked for Cambridge International, so I could see quite a lot of this these challenges happening sort of out there in the field. Before I go into too much detail on impersonation, I'll just talk you through a little bit about RM Studio. So there's about 15 of us. We basically work in the innovation function of RM. So we take real life problems. We think in terms of hypotheses. So we do a lot of hypothesis testing. We frame those problems in context that's related to the customer, to the user, and to the outcome that we would hope to achieve in terms of helping our customers to have the best possible assessment that's fair, that's reliable, and that's valid. And then we often do some proof of concept work with partners as well. And I'm going to talk about a success story for that towards the end of the seminar. And then we do a lot of desk research, which is partly what we're going to talk about in terms of impersonation. And then we explore some solution tools, and that's where Alex will come in. So in the impersonation space, we know that people in parts of the world, and we're talking particularly about Africa here, we know that people are encouraging others to go and sit tests that as an imposter. So they're sitting a test that in place of somebody that they're not. And that's actually, we know anecdotally that that's being encouraged by some centres, some rogue centres, if you like. So we've been talking about that problem. We've been unpicking it. We've been talking to various people around the business, and we're looking to try to come up with a hypothesis that then we can go away and test. This is incredibly early days. So I'm going to pass over to Alex really quickly, who I think he's going to talk about. Ian, if you just pop the next slide along, it will bring up the context there of, does it show up the next? Yeah.
Yep.
So we're looking at imposter sitting, handwriting detection hypothesis, and I'll pass over to Alex just to explain that.
Yeah, thanks, Gwyneth. Well, as Ian and Gwyneth said, we are exploring many ideas, and some are further along than others. This is one of the earlier ones, and we're still at the stage where we'd like to understand the size of it. I think we feel that we've got a good understanding of the impact, both in terms of the impact on the awarding body and the candidates. However, we aren't sure how common this is. At the same time, we do have a hypothesis that we can treat candidates' handwriting, for example, the way that they write common words like the, many, also, we can treat that as their signature. And then applying existing signature matching techniques, we may be able to detect when this candidate handwriting changes over a couple of papers, a couple of sessions. And if one paper does not match another, it could be grounds for somebody to manually compare the documents, which may lead to the detection of a candidate having had their exam sat by somebody else. So if I think probably a call to action is if you would like to know more, or if you have any insights that could help us explore this, we would love to hear from you. And I imagine, Ian, that people can mention in chat or reach out to one of us on the call.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes, and we'll have a call to action with contact details at the end of the session.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Great. Pass back to you, Ian.
Great, thank you, Gwyneth. So that was just a touch on some of the earliest stages of where we're continuing to look to try to support organisations facing particular challenges. Second area that we want to focus on is around external assistance, where third parties impact a student's examination, and that intervention, that external assistance, can happen at different stages of the examination process. Maybe within the actual test centre itself, within the school, with an exam officer or teacher giving answers in exchange for payment, students being threatened to pay money or they'll be failed. But equally, further down the process of administering an exam, maybe delivery drivers moving exam booklets, markers receiving them for a particular school, being able to tamper with responses. Now, I'm not going to suggest that there's one magic solution to the issue of external assistance, but I'm going to suggest several different techniques that could help to detect and prevent some of this external assistance. Now, Gwyneth and Alex have just touched on the use of handwriting detection being used to detect impersonation, and that would rely on the scanning and electronic processing of exam booklets. And the electronic processing of booklets can open up lots of different techniques that can help address issues relating to that sort of external assistance. And I'm just going to touch on 4 areas briefly. So first of all, I'm just going to look at some of the benefits of digitizing exam booklets. Because as soon as you digitize or scan a copy of an exam booklet, we get a definitive record of the candidate's response that can't then be altered. Rather than passing booklets to multiple different individuals, markers, recorders, storage companies, and so on, the booklet and any other associated exam material are handled once by being shipped to a secure processing facility where they're scanned and digitized. And at that point, they can't be interfered with. So that reduces the opportunity for individuals to tamper with booklets from individuals or from whole exam centres. Now, that doesn't address issues of individuals altering booklets earlier on in the cycle, but it does help to reduce some of the opportunities for external intervention further down the line. But secondly, the act of doing that digitization, that scanning and indexing of a booklet to a candidate record, also enables a first set of reconciliation checks to be made. You know, things like, are all the booklets that were supposed to be arriving from a particular centre, are they actually present? Does that tie up with the attendance register from the centre? You know, an exam officer could interfere with that process. The electronic records do provide an initial check. And it might be that there are some flags that could be detected earlier in the process. So, for example, higher than expected absence rates for a particular exam, or missing booklets. Yeah, that might start to indicate that there's a problem worth investigating. Once the exam script's been digitized, we can then start the process of marking, and I'm not going to talk in detail about that on-screen marking process today, because I'm sure it's familiar to you, where markers use a web browser to access an image of the exam booklet rather than the physical booklet being marked itself. Now, aside from not having to distribute large volumes of exam booklets out to markers, there are lots of other advantages there. And a significant help when addressing issues of external assistance is to automate and anonymize the allocation of booklets out to markers. Systems can be configured to prevent the allocation of booklets from a particular school to a particular marker, for example. And that's really helpful because it can help to ensure that individual markers don't receive the booklets from their own students, for example, so reducing the opportunity for cheating. But the other thing that we can then do is to break the booklet up into chunks or segments with different markers marking different parts. And again, that can have can make a big difference in reducing bias, but also ensuring that candidates get fair marking of their exams. The last area that I want to touch on around external assistance, though, is around the use of data. And the whole process of scanning and processing of electronic marking leads to the collection of huge amounts of data, and that can be really helpful in identifying unexpected activity and trends that just don't look right. For example, unexpected results from a particular centre. And that might be that a particular centre normally is very high performing, but all of a sudden they have a set of results that are particularly poor for them. Maybe that is showing that you know there's some unexpected activity going on. Maybe a set of high performing students are being penalised for some reason, or where a centre that has normally doesn't perform particularly well, the students in there don't perform particularly well, suddenly has a really high set of high performing candidates. And again, that's not to say that there's necessarily something wrong, but it might be that there's an unexpected trend that's worth investigating. Or where a candidate's performance on different papers varies significantly, maybe again giving rise to further review. Were they helped in one of those exam papers and not in another, for example? We're also looking at investigating how data could be used more broadly to identify potential at-risk results. Now, that could be done by looking at a broader range of assessments and coursework produced by an individual student. Maybe if a student performed really well throughout their whole education, with really good evidence from coursework and practice exams, for example, but then performed very badly in their final end of course exam, is that a sign that there's other factors at play? You know, if a student didn't perform particularly well in their school life, but had fantastic exam results, is there something worth checking? If a whole cohort of students performed well in an exam, but their general class performance wasn't great, could there be malpractice going on? Definitely not a certainty. But our experience is that layering on of different checks to deter, to prevent, to detect malpractice continues to give us the best opportunity of identifying where there are issues at play that are worth checking. Now, we've looked a lot around paper over the last few minutes, and we're going to move on now for a moment just to talk about digital assessment. And we're seeing an emergence of digital assessment in different types of exams, so particularly in teaching qualifications and with other professional bodies. And we've been doing some work with one professional organisation looking at how to use particularly data matching techniques to be able to identify malpractice. And I'm going to pass back to Gwyneth for a moment to talk about some of those techniques. So, Gwyneth.
Thank you, Ian. That's great. Yeah, I mean, this is, as I said earlier, this is one of our success stories from the innovation arm, RM Studio. And as Ian was just saying, this came out of one of our customers looking at their data. And it started with some sort of anecdotal concerns. And then they came to Alex, who's the person who invented this. So I'm not taking your thunder, Alex, here, but feel free to chip in if you'd like. But I'll just briefly explain what it was. So yeah, it's all data based text. So it could be HTML, it could be Word documents, it could be PDF documents, but it can't be handwritten text at this point. They're closed book exams for a certain period of time, and they're taken online. In some cases, mostly proctored assessments, but we are starting to reach out and look at test centres as well. And the way that we run the service before I go into how the solution works is that we started off as a proof of concept with this one customer, and we started off as doing a free health check with them, developed the service. Alex and the rest of the data team went directly to the customer, looking at their data, back and forth, lots of interrogation, lots of investigation, lots of joint collaborative work, which was beneficial to both parties. Lots of transparency, I think, which really helped the process as well. We did that for free, and then the idea is that we then moved on to, and that was, sorry, just to come back to the free point, we looked at past data, so data on an exam session that had already taken place, and then we looked to support them in their live series, and that was a chargeable service, and the team were on hand looking at the data going forward, and we've been developing new features in the product as we've gone. So how it works, so what we do is we take a whole load of, we establish a pool of scripts, exam scripts, and we do a lot of different comparisons, one against another. Alex, it might actually make sense, if you're still there, for you to come in on this if you want to. It's fine if you're not there, because you're the scientist behind this.
Yeah, yes,
yeah,
I am.
Do you want us to explain the solution, because you'll do it a lot better than me?
Sure. So I will do a very, very quick sort of 30-second. So I think it's probably good to talk about the synonym thing. So we've had candidates that can obviously see an answer, and they are writing that out during the exam, but they'll change key phrases, keywords within the answer. The tool is clever enough not to be tricked by synonyms, and in essence, it looks for large portions of an answer that is similar to any other candidate within that session. And I think that's the power of this, that we can then start to investigate pairs of candidates, but quite quickly you can identify a network of candidates. So maybe candidate A with candidate B, but then all of a sudden C is being matched to one of those, and then more and more, and you might start to see similarities. Maybe they're all in the same town, same area, same centre, same learning provider, and things like that. But that's all. In a minute, that's probably in a nutshell. That's how it works. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. And then what we did as part of our health check and then our paid pilot was that we sent our suspected cases, the cases that we flagged where we believed, or where we wanted the exam board to go away and investigate themselves, that candidates had colluded. So they'd worked with one another, they'd submitted the same response as other candidates, as Alex has just touched on, sometimes as two pairs of documents, as it says here, one being the same as another, and then when we compare them all together, the two flag up. Or what we're starting to see is that in some parts of the world there are networks of students colluding potentially in the same geographic location. So our job was to find the cases, to do the science work behind it, and then pass over what we suspected to be suspicious to the exam board, and they brought in their ethical committee to see if any results needed to be nullified. And that's kind of an ongoing service that we're still looking to work with new partners. We're doing some free health checks all the time, yeah, that's basically it, I think, Ian.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Have I missed anything? Okay.
No. So this area of candidates colluding is something that's really been brought to the fore as people have been doing more remotely proctored exams, and have been able to, organisations have identified that actually there is malpractice going on, and we're still interested to understand more about whether that same type of collusion is happening within test centres, particularly road test centres, and exploring more about that. But we know that that there are a lot of really quite technically complex ways that individuals have found of being able to work around some of the security measures put in place by different exam boards. And the organisations that we've worked with around this type of collusion detection have been amazed to find the level of cheating that's going on, and more importantly, they've been delighted with the evidence that we've been able to provide them with to be able to act on that, to be able to improve the integrity of their qualifications. And that will continue to be another area that we develop and work on, how we can extend that capability in the coming times. So hopefully over the last 25 minutes or so, we've touched on a number of different areas that might be of interest to you. I'd say again that our experience is that layering on of many different techniques to deter cheating, to prevent cheating, and to detect where it's going on, are all about trying to improve integrity of the high stakes assessment. High stakes assessment are big business. They can lead to life-changing qualifications that can have such an impact on an individual's future career and future prospects. And so it's natural that trying to cheat and trying to gain an advantage over the system is also big business, and we'll continue to find ways of layering on different techniques to address that. So hopefully some of those areas that Gwyneth and I have shared are of interest and have sparked some questions and thoughts with you. Steve, shall I come back to you just to draw us to a close?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much to Ian, Gwyneth and Alex for sharing your thoughts and some of the work that we've been doing in terms of trying to tackle this sort of quite challenging problem, really. I guess the way I would sum up is malpractice isn't going away. I think we'd like to think it would. I think we'd like to think that all our students and other people involved in the process of delivering high stakes assessment, whether it's in general qualifications or in professional qualifications, we'd like to think that everybody is honourable and professional and values assessment the way that we do. But I don't think that's the case. And I guess the analogy I would use is that no one switches on their laptop or PCs these days without having some form of antivirus software. We know that antivirus or sort of viruses and malware is deliberately released into the market for all sorts of reasons. So we have the right protections in place, and those protections are constantly being updated. And then the people that try to develop the malware are constantly thinking of more sophisticated ways of trying to work around it. I think that's going to be the case when it comes to exam malpractice. Students are increasingly connected and working out ways in which they can cheat the system. So I think as a technology provider in assessment, we're constantly looking at ways of how can we work with exam boards across the world to try and prevent that and reduce the probability of malpractice happening across exams. I think when it comes to digital assessment, I think we've got some really good proven tools and techniques that we can share with people to look at those digital assessments and look for evidence of student collusion, for example. And there are other sort of software providers out there that will provide tools to look at things like plagiarism, for example, and they exist. When it comes to dealing with handwritten paper-based scripts, that's another challenge. But again, some of the work that Alex and Gwyneth have been doing to look at styles of handwriting could be really interesting to detect collusion or imposters in centres where handwritten scripts are being delivered. As I say, it's early days, but if anybody on this particular webinar is interested in exploring that more and seeing how we could work together to run proof of concepts and pilots, would be really, really interested to hear from you. So I'll draw it to a close. Please keep an eye on our website, because we are going to be releasing some more information about the work we're doing on our website. And also, so please do keep in touch. If you are interested, please raise a question. Or indeed, if you want to find out more, then contact me, sharrington@rm.com, and I'll be delighted to work with you and introduce the team and see how we could work with you. So thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions that are popped into the chat.
Yeah, we've got one question, Steve, from Moses, saying we'll be grateful to have an idea about the digital assessment tools, other opportunities for training. And I'm conscious, Moses, we've not talked around the actual digital assessment platform that RM has today, but we'd be really happy to share something of that with you. And yes, absolutely, there are opportunities for training as well. And maybe, Steve, that's something that we can follow up with separately with Moses as well.
Yes, indeed. Moses, if you can pop I think we probably do have your email address, but if you can pop it in the chat, if you don't mind, then we'll pick that up and I'll follow up with you after the webinar. Looks like Sam's typing a response as well. And just while Sam's doing that, are there any other questions from anybody else that has joined this call? I mean, maybe I'll just throw something out there. I mean, is this a has it been of interest, and are you seeing challenges that the types of things that we've talked about on this call, you know, across your own organizations, for example? Thank you, Moses.
Yes, I think Steve, we'll give people a chance to think. As I said right at the beginning, my experience is that these types of issues are being faced by organisations the world over, and it's really it's quite easy to look at particular nations or regions or types of assessment as being particularly susceptible to issues about assessment security and integrity. And I think one of our experiences working as we do with organisations around the world is that we see some of these types of challenges being faced the world over. The differences, I guess, are the exact nature of the issues being faced may vary from organisation to organisation. But I guess there's an element of giving assurance to organisations that on the surface you might feel that you're particularly exposed or particularly susceptible to issues of around exam integrity. But it's really just to affirm that there are this continues to be a lucrative area around the world for individuals to try and cheat the system. So we'll continue to try and find ways of supporting organisations as best we can.
Absolutely. Just to add in there, Ian, as well, I think there is there's an element of this. Organisations that are concerned to keep this kind of under a lid at the moment and kind of hide what's going on. But I think in terms of the experience of reading and talking to lots of different organisations globally as well, I can really see that people are starting to realise, oh my gosh, it's not just me, it's not just us, it's happening to everybody. And I think that the market is starting to shift towards admitting it, and then an ability to kind of explore it and say, actually, okay, it's not just us. We don't need to keep a lid on it. Let's go and do something about it. And let's be open about that. And I know a lot of organisations are starting to publish what they're doing so that candidates know in advance of taking an exam, you're not going to just be, you're going to have your work investigated afterwards. So be warned.
I think we're also aware that we've deliberately not focused too much around digital assessment today. We've touched on a few areas, but for organisations that are looking at on-screen testing, actually that opens up other ways that we can start to protect the integrity of assessments as well. And there's some really interesting areas there that we'd be really happy to explore in maybe in a later webinar. But some different techniques that can such as adaptive testing that can change the whole way that individuals interact with assessments as well, make it quite a lot harder for cheating to occur. But as I say, we've deliberately not focused too much around that in this session today.
Absolutely.
Great. Are there any other questions that anybody would like to raise? I can't see anybody typing in the message box, so I think what we'll probably do is we'll draw it to a close. Thank you very much for joining. I hope that's been useful. As I say, please do keep an eye out on our website, because we are going to be publishing some more articles about malpractice on our website, so please keep an eye on that. If you're interested in exploring the types of work we've been doing and whether that can help you in terms of preventing malpractice or collusion, etc., then please do get in touch. sharrington@rm.com. Sam, if you could put your email address in the chat as well, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. And a sort of contact to both of us, that'd be great. And then wish you a good day. Thank you very much for joining. And the next webinar we plan to run will probably be in February next year. Topic to be defined. So keep an eye out and look forward to seeing you again. And it may be a little bit early, but dare I say,
don't wish us happy Christmas, Steve.
Enjoy the festive season when it comes.
That's better.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks for joining.